Hi everyone, and welcome back to my channel. I am so excited for today's video. I can hardly stand it. I am going to be showing you, swatching, and trying on 2 out of the 3 palettes from the ODEN'S Perfect World collection. I actually just opened these palettes up. They are fresh, straight out of the mailbox, and I can't wait to start playing with them. I purchased 2 out of the 3, so I bought the Sea Talk palette in collaboration with Lauren May Beauty and the Flora Story palette in collaboration with Makeup Just for Fun. There is another stunningly beautiful palette in collaboration with Betty Jean from Batty Bean, and I didn't purchase that one. No shade to Betty Jean whatsoever, but I just bought the Glamlight and Barbie palette, which has a lot of bright shades in it. So I felt like I couldn't justify buying that one, but obviously no shade. I don't know why I feel like I'm excluding somebody from the party when it's literally just eyeshadow, but I felt like I should say that. Her palette is also stunning though, so if you are needing a palette with a bunch of bright colors, definitely check that one out. But I will be showing you the 2 that I purchased. I think I'm going to do some up-close shots of the palette so you can get an idea and also swatch them, and then I'll do an eye look using one of these palettes today, and then I'll come back tomorrow and do an eye look using the other palette. So if you are interested in seeing these palettes and all of the shades and what they look like on the eyes, just keep watching. So I have actually purchased from ODEN'S one other time, and it was another collab palette. So I bought the Hella palette in collaboration with Angelica Nyqvist, and I was really impressed by the quality of the shadows. Obviously, I loved the color story of that palette, and also just the attention to detail when it came to the artwork. And I know ultimately we're all buying eyeshadow probably just for the shadows themselves, but I think the experience of makeup is part of the fun. So I did just want to mention the attention to detail that went into these palettes as well. So they come in this beautiful box that has the portraits of the 3 creators, and then it has this sweet little card where the creators have written their thank yous for purchasing the collection. And then it also came with these 2 ribbons or scarves. I can't remember the exact word that they use on the website, but they have limited edition ribbons / scarves with the artwork associated with each palette. So I'm not sure how well you can see that, but this is the artwork from the Makeup Just for Fun palette. And then here is the scarf with the artwork from the Lauren May Beauty palette. There's Lauren as a little mermaid. So cute! The palettes themselves come with a nice sleeve that matches the artwork on the inside, and then each palette comes with 10 shades in the typical ODEN'S square pans. So I should say, if you're looking for more details about the palettes, each of the creators has their own video explaining the decisions behind the shades that they chose and giving you all that background. So definitely go check them out, and I'll have each of the creators linked in the description box. But I am dying to do some swatches of these palettes, so I think that's what I'm gonna do next. Although I also get a little bit nervous. Is anyone else like this? When you get a new palette, you're like nervous to touch it for some reason? Because I just want to keep it pristine. But the point of eyeshadow is to be used, so the sooner I get over that, the better. So let's start with the Lauren May collab palette, the Sea Talk palette. Little fact about me, I love mermaids, and I love the underwater atmosphere and the ocean, and all of that is really fascinating to me. I also really love the forest. So both of these palettes really spoke to me for that reason, and also they are 2 creators that I've followed for a while. Lauren May Beauty has inspired a lot of the content that I make on my own YouTube channel, so definitely wanted to support her in that way as well. And her palette is like a perfect mix of more wearable neutral shades and fun pops. So it looks like there's some warmer neutrals, some, you know, kind of cooler neutrals, and then some fun pops of color with the bright pink, the bright green, there's like a teal kind of a shade, and then those dark denim shimmers. I actually did dig my finger slightly into the deep blue shimmer called Ocean Jewel, so please forgive that in the close-up shots. They also have gorgeous embossing detail on the matte shades that look like Little Mermaid scales, which is just so pretty, and I hate to mess it up with the swatches, but that is what we're here for. So I think let's go ahead and get started with the swatches. So I will go row by row in order, and hopefully you will get a better picture of what the kinds of formulas are that are in here and also the shades. I'm nervous. I'm so nervous to touch this right now. Okay, let's do it. So here are the first 4 shades finger swatched. First up we have Dolphin Tail, Sunken Treasure. That shimmer is stunningly buttery and smooth. Then we have Electric Kelp, which is a satin. And then Mermaid Scale. Mermaid Scale looks really cool. It's definitely like a bright, lighter blue turquoise shade, but it has some glitters that are in other colors, like gold, orange, maybe a little bit of green too. Stunning. Here are the next 4 finger swatched. So the last one in the top row is called Ocean Jewel. Ooh, pretty. It has like a warm base to it. I love that. And then first up in the second row, we have Smoky Pearl, which looks to me like a classic Lauren May Beauty taupe shimmer. If you watch Lauren, you know she's fond of some taupes. So I'm really glad she got the chance to include such a her shade in her palette. And then we have Driftwood, ooh, which is a really rich, chocolatey brown matte. Sorry for the swatch there. And then Iridescent Shell, which came up a little bit crumbly when I swatched it. That one is a crumblier shade, so I tried to kind of fix the swatch there a little bit. In the pan, it looks like it's gonna be a bright hot pink, but when you actually swatch it out, it's a really pretty kind of baby pink with purple periwinkly sparkles to it, which is really, really beautiful. And I think you could sheer it out even further to just be a really nice kind of iridescent pink. Okay, and then the last 2 shades from the Sea Talk palette are both blues. We have Sea Spray and Night Swim. I actually just went over both of those shades again just to see, but they are both pretty sheer. Sea Spray is this one here. It's coming up on the camera as sort of like an iridescent gray. In the pan, it looks like it's going to be a deep denim blue. Same with this one. It looks like it's going to be very, very dark, but it actually sheers out and looks a lot more gray in the swatch. So here are the swatches of the Sea Talk palette. So I'm just noticing the Sea Talk palette has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 shimmer shades and a satin, and the Flora Story palette has 5 shimmers. So we've got some more mattes in the Flora Story palette, which I'm actually really excited about because I think the mattes in here are really unique and stunning colors. So let's do some swatches. Again, starting from the top row and working my way around. I should say the embossing in this palette looks like little leaves, which is really super cute. They've thought of everything in these palettes. Okay, so first up is Dawn. Stunning iridescent shade. Then we have Shroom. Which is a really light brown. I might actually go over that one again. See if we can get a little more payoff. Okay, so still swatching kind of sheer, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's gonna go on sheer on the eyes. Then we have Magnolia. Oh my gosh. I can already tell I'm going to be obsessed with that shade. It's so pretty. Kind of like a cool toned deep purple. And then we have Sage. Really pretty green matte. As I'm swatching these, the mattes all feel pretty dry, and I probably did know that about ODEN'S when I first got the Hello palette, but this is just reminding me that it is a drier matte formula, which is not necessarily a bad thing. I oftentimes prefer a drier matte formula that builds rather than a super kind of hydrated, high impact pigmented formula like the Natasha Denona type shadow. Sometimes those shades go on highly pigmented and then you have to blend them out after. I tend to like to start sheer and then build up. So I'm looking forward to seeing how the mattes go on the eyes and build and everything. I think I forgot to show you the up close finger swatches for the first few. So here are the next 4 from the palette, just finger swatched. Last in the top row, we have Lush. Gorgeous tealy green. And then first in the bottom row, we have Clover. Then Best Buds. Such a pretty light green shimmer. That's not too minty or too teal. I really like this particular shade of green that they've gone for. And then Azalea. Again, not swatching the absolute best in terms of like pigmentation on contact, but not an indication of how the shades are going to work on the eyes, so try to keep that in mind. And then the last 2 from the palette here, we have Misty and Orchid. And here are the swatches from the Flora Story palette. Trying to get both arms in the frame so that you can hopefully see the palettes swatched up against one another. There aren't really any repeat shades at all, but I actually think the palettes would make pretty nice companion palettes to one another. That shade Best Buds is very similar to the shade Iridescent Shell in the Sea Talk palette. They both have that kind of flaky, iridescent texture. I think these 2 would make really nice companion palettes. I mean, you have purpley pinks in both, and you have greens in both, and you have neutrals in both. And I actually think the blues from the Sea Talk palette might work really well with the greens from the Flora Story palette. So lots of different combinations to work with here. Now we just have the impossible task of trying to figure out what look to do. I am feeling a 3 looks 1 palette coming on for both of these palettes because there's just so many looks that I'm seeing in my mind's eye right now that I could go for. Let me know if that would be something you would be interested in seeing, and I can get those videos filmed soon. But that's also such a joy because both of these palettes are really inspiring me to come up with creative looks, and that's exactly what I want in a new eyeshadow palette. I think though, for my first look, I'm going to use the Sea Talk palette, and I think I'm going to do something pink and blue, maybe with a bit of that deepest purpley blue shade called Ocean Jewel as well. What to do? What to do? I want to put all of them on my eyes all at the same time, but I don't think that's going to work. Okay, while I'm figuring out exactly what look I want to do, I've zoomed you in a bit, and I'm going to start with a matte in the crease. I'm just going to take Dolphin Tail, which is the kind of cool toned matte brown in this palette, and I'm going to apply that with a fluffy brush just through the crease of my eye. Before I start, I should say I've primed my lids with the Bobbi Brown Longwear Cream Shadow Stick in Bone, and I've set my lids with a bone colored matte eyeshadow from a different palette. Oh, and I also pulled my hair back and put the Sea Talk scarf in my ponytail. I used to wear my hair like this all the time, and I think it's really cute. So just going in with that shade Dolphin Tail to give me some kind of a transition and a little bit of depth through the crease. This is a very smoky, kind of charcoal gray color. So it's a little bit more cool toned than what I would typically go for as a transition shade, but I think it'll complement, if I'm going to be using that darker blue, I think it'll complement that really well. And just give us a bit of something to help ground the look as I'm working with brighter and more colorful shades. Okay, I think I'm going to deepen up my crease slightly with the shade Night Swim, which is like that deep navy matte color. I'm taking this on a smaller but still fluffy brush. This is the Spectrum and KJH 17 brush. And I'm just gonna start putting this on my outer corner. This one was a little bit sheer in the swatch. So I'm wondering how it's gonna build. I'm not sure how well you can see that, but it's going on pretty sheer on my eyes as well. It's almost more of like a smoky haze of blue rather than a super full pigmented application. So I'm just gonna press it into my eye and see if I can build that color up at all. And that seems to help. So just kind of pushing it into the eye and then blending rather than starting the application by blending, if that makes sense. I think that's looking pretty good. I'm going to take my fluffy brush again and blend at the edge. And I'm going to match up the other eye as well. Okay, not totally blended quite yet, but that's okay. We can always go back in and do some more blending later. But next, I'm going to continue to build out the outer corner with this deep denim-y blue shimmer called Ocean Jewel. And I'm gonna take this on a flat brush and spray it, even though I think I'll get better payoff with my finger, but I will go back over with my finger at the end once I've got the structure of the look kind of created. But for now, I wanna be a little bit more precise. So I'm just taking a flat brush and I'm just gonna put that kind of over that blue matte on the lid. I don't know how well you can see that, but there's quite a bit of purple coming through, which is great. That's exactly what I wanted. It is, you know, definitely blue and purple, but there is some purple there. Such a pretty shade. I love that it has a little bit of purple to it. Gonna repeat that on the other side. Okay, and then I'm gonna flip my brush over and I'm gonna go into the shade Mermaid Scale, which is that really bright kind of tealy seafoam green shade with a lot of gold shimmer to it. Get that on my brush and spray. And then I'm gonna put that through the middle of my lid and eventually blend it with that deeper blue shade. This one is a really soft, creamy, buttery texture. It's really easy to apply. Wow, that goes on really well. Even without spraying it, like it just picks up beautifully on the brush. Okay, and then because I use the same brush, I can just kind of flip back and forth to try to blend those two together. Okay, and then for the inner part of my eye, I'm gonna take the shade Iridescent Shell, which is that really pretty pink that has all the other shimmers in it. It has purple and blue shimmers in it. And I'm definitely gonna spray this because this is the one that had a little bit of that flakier texture to it. And just go right in the inner part of my eye. And I can see right away the blue sparkles that this shade has. It's really picking up. It must be, I don't know, reflecting off of the other blues I have in my eye, but it doesn't necessarily look pink at all. It looks tiny bit of pink, but mainly blue and purple sparkles. My fear is that because this is so crumbly, I'm not going to be able to build it up in the way that I want. But I'm just going to try my best. Oh, that seems to be building. Definitely on the flaky side though, and I'm getting a little bit of fallout down here, which isn't a huge deal. And then I'm going to go back in with the brush that I had the shade Mermaid Scale on and just blend those two into each other a little bit. So that's where we are. I'm going to go match up the other side. I think some of that fallout is just gonna be there for the rest of the day, which is fine, but maybe something to keep in mind, especially if you're working with those flakier shades like the shade Iridescent Shell. You might want to do your base makeup after your eye makeup to avoid the fallout situation. But I'm gonna go back in with that smaller fluffy brush I used for my deepening shade, and I'm actually gonna take a little bit more of that shade and just make sure I haven't lost my outer corner definition here. And then for the lower lash line, I'm going to go back in with that matte navy color called Night Swim. And on the outer kind of third, I'm going to match that up with the upper part of my lid. And then I'm going to take some more Ocean Jewel, that deeper blue shimmer, and spray my brush and go over that a little bit. Oh yeah, this is Fallout Central. So definitely do your base makeup first if you are working with this palette. Even though I sprayed my brush, maybe I didn't spray it enough. I also think I probably just picked up too much of that shade. So it could be that the fallout is more easily avoidable than I'm making it look, but I'm just making some rookie mistakes here. I'm actually, at this point, I'm going to take my concealer off and reapply it. Not a huge deal. I just definitely should have done my base makeup after my eye look. Okay, I'm just going to blend over that slightly. And then I'm going to take that teal shade Mermaid Scale and spray my brush and blend that into the first shade that we used. Kind of so far mirroring what I have on the top lid, just on the bottom. Okay, and then instead of going in with Iridescent Shell on the inner part like we did on the top lid, I'm going to take Electric Kelp, which is just that super bright yellowy green satin shade. Taking this up on a little brush and spraying it again, and then just placing that on this inner portion and kind of connecting up with that inner corner. Blending that slightly into that teal shade. And then where it meets up with Iridescent Shell on the inner corner, I'm going to take a little bit of Iridescent Shell and just tap it over to help blend those two together. Okay, so let me go fix up my concealer, put some mascara on, and pick out a lip, and then I will be back to show you the final look and give you my first impressions of the Sea Talk palette. Okay, we're back. Mascara and lips are on, and this is the finished look. I think it came out really cute. I definitely went hard on the colorful side to this palette. There is an entirely neutral corner, but I mainly wanted to try to use as many shades as I could out of the palette in an eye look, and that is what I have done here today. So thinking back on the shades that I used, I think I can give you some of my first impressions of them. The shade Dolphin Tail, which was that cooler brown that I used through my crease, was quite sheer, but I felt like it was buildable and could definitely be built up to be very smoky. but it was also one of those shades that I felt like if I kept blending and blending, it was going to get too muddy and out of hand. It's a little bit too dark to be a perfect transition shade, and I think that's why I had that feeling, but that's not a huge deal. You can always dip into other palettes or just use a bronzer or whatever, but I'm really interested to see how that shade pairs with the neutrals in the palette, so I'm withholding judgment on that shade just yet. I then went in with the matte navy shade called Night Swim, and I felt like that one performed really well. It built up on itself really nicely, definitely added some nice depth to the outer corner, and I don't know, made the look a little bit more smoky and glam, and I thought that was a nice shade to work with. Same with Ocean Jewel, which is that deepest navy shimmer, but it has more purple in it than you would think. I love the way that the purple and the pink sparkles shine through. I'm not sure how much you can see that on the eyes, especially since I've now blended that shade into other shades, but I think that is a really, really special shade, a really nice one. And it looks different than how it looks in the pan, which is fun because, you know, just looking in the pan, it looks like a pretty standard navy shimmer, and there's a lot more to it than that. The shade Mermaid Scale was probably my favorite to work with so far in the palette in terms of formula. That's the teal shimmer right here that has a lot of that kind of lime green gold sparkle in it. It just went on so smoothly. It built up really nicely and was like a nice thick shimmer. Do you know what I mean? I didn't have to work really hard to put layers and layers of it on top of itself to get a nice even payoff across the lid. So that one was just really nice to work with. The shade Iridescent Shell, which looks, that's the one that looks really pink in the pan. This one I'm still trying to get my head around. It goes on the eye pretty much nothing like it looks in the pan. That's the shade that I put through the inner part of my lid here. I think it's really pretty. I'm not sure how it's coming up on the camera for you, but in person it is pretty. It's definitely pulling a little bit more blue purple than how it looks in the pan. It looks straight up hot pink. But since it is an iridescent, I have a feeling that whatever you layer it over is kind of how it's going to reflect. There is an iridescent kind of multi-chrome shade in the ODEN'S Hello palette that I have. I think this one is a little bit different than that because it's very, very sheer. So I'm not saying it's a bad shade by any means, but it's definitely one that I want to keep playing with. It's a much, much thinner texture than something like Mermaid Scale, even though they look really similar in the palette. Mermaid Scale is that thick, buttery shimmer texture, and Iridescent Shell is just very thin with the sparkles kind of widely dispersed throughout it. So I think it looks really pretty on the inner corner. Maybe that's how I would use it, or tapped all over the lid would be really beautiful. Part of me wants to use Iridescent Shell over one of the brown mattes in the palette to see what that would look like. I feel like that could look really cool. It gave me a little bit of trouble today just because it was that super flaky texture, and I don't know if the way that I was trying to use it is the way that it's meant to be used. Maybe it's more of like a topper shade. So I want to keep playing with that one a bit more. The other shade that I used was Electric Kelp, which is what I have on the inner corner on my lower lash line. And that shade is really nice. It is a satin and you can see a little bit of a sheen to it on the eyes, but it's mainly matte. Like, I don't know. There's nothing super poppy about the sparkles that are in it. It just has a little bit of that sheen. But I would probably use it in the same way that I would use a matte, but I do absolutely love the color and the pigmentation of it is really nice. And I have to say, I like the way all of these colors played together. It was a little bit touch and go there for a minute. I kind of wasn't sure how the look was going to turn out. But I think when all is said and done, it is definitely capturing the spirit of the Sea Talk palette and the mermaid vibes, which we all know I love. And it was a lot of fun to create this look and try and use as many shades as I could. But still, there's so many other ways to go with this palette, so I look forward to using this more and maybe in future videos as well. So look one is complete. I'm going to pass you over now to future Sarah, who is going to do a second look using the Flora Story palette. Okay, we're back. I just spent genuinely like 15 minutes trying to get the Flora Story scarf into a bow in my hair, only to realize that you are not even gonna see it, but that's okay. I am back to do my second look using the Flora Story palette. I have an idea of what I would like to do. Again, I'd like to use as many shades as I possibly can from this palette. I'm just not sure exactly how it's going to turn out, so we're just going to try it, experiment, and play and see how it goes. So let me zoom you in. Okay, so I've zoomed you in and I'm gonna get started with some mattes here. I think I'm gonna try to go for a two-toned green and purple eye, but we'll see how it turns out. So I'm gonna start with the shade Clover, which is the lightest of the matte greens in the palette. And I'm gonna take this on a fluffy brush. I'm just gonna start by putting that through the front half of my crease. This shade has a good amount of kick up in the pan, actually. And I'm bringing this up quite high because I'd like for the shades in my crease to still be seen when my eyes are open. Okay, and then I'm gonna switch to a different fluffy brush and go in with the shade Azalea, which is the lightest of the two matte purples, and put that on the outer half of my crease. I'm just gonna kind of meet it up to the green in the middle. They're not gonna blend together really because it's purple and green, but just to kind of give the illusion of a blend there, I'll just meet them up together, and then when the shimmers are on, I don't think it'll be too obvious that the crease shades haven't blended perfectly. So switching back to my first brush and that first shade, and just pulling that green up to meet the purple in the middle, without trying to blend too much because I don't want it to just turn brown and get really muddy. And then on a slightly smaller but still fluffy blending brush, I'm going to take the shade Sage, and I'm just going to put that a little bit lower down where I have the green in the front part of the crease to just deepen that up slightly. So far these mattes are going on lightly pigmented but blendable, I would say. And I'll just take my other brush and blend out that edge with some of that lighter green. I think this is going to be a trust the process kind of a look. Okay, and then on a different, slightly smaller but still fluffy brush, I'm going to take the shade Orchid and deepen up the outer half of my eye. Again, just going right up to the green, but not really blending the two together. And then I'm going to take this one down onto my outer corner too. Going back with my first brush to blend out that edge. That shade Orchid feels a little bit more pigmented than the other mattes so far. I'm barely touching my brush in there and I'm getting lots of pigment. Okay, things are looking a little bit crazy, but I'm gonna get the shimmers on and then we can go back and tinker with the mattes a little bit more at the end. So I'm actually gonna just go in with my fingers for this one because I'd like to see how the shimmers perform, if it's any different from using the brush and spraying my brush as I did last time, which means I'm just gonna have a little bit less of a precise application, but I think it'll be okay. So I'm gonna go in with the shade Best Buds. It's the lightest green shimmer in the palette, and this is what I'm going to put on the inner part of my eye. So just taking that on my pinky and placing that right on the inner kind of quarter. That shade goes on so beautifully. Same on the other eye. Stunningly pigmented. Next, I'm going to take the shade Misty, which is the second deepest green shimmer in the palette. And I'm just going to nestle that one right up next to Best Buds. And take it in a little bit further towards the halfway point of my lid. This one feels a little bit thinner than Best Buds did, but still going on really creamy, not too flaky or anything. I didn't mean to go quite as high as I did with the shimmers. I wanted some of that matte to still be showing, so I will just go back over that in a minute, but just blending those two shades into one another. When you're using your fingers, it just literally feels like finger painting. It's kind of fun. And I feel like I'm getting a way better payoff from the shimmers just using my fingers. Okay, and then for the outer half of my eye, I'm gonna take the two deepest shades. So first I'm gonna go in with Lush, which is kind of a tealy green shade, but I think it will blend the nicest into the purple of the shades that are in the palette. And I'm just gonna meet that up with Misty. And start building out the outer corner. Again, just kind of blending back and forth between the shades as best as I can. And finally, I'm gonna take Magnolia, which is actually, now that I'm looking at the palette, it's the only purple shimmer. I don't know why I had it in my head that there would be a lighter shimmer. This one is still pretty light though. I'm just gonna tap that on the outer corner. And blend it a bit with the shade Lush, which was that teal shade. The purple and the teal don't exactly blend together, but I think it works for what the look is doing. So we're just getting a little bit of a gradient effect, starting with the lightest green and moving out to the purple. I told you I wasn't entirely sure how this would work, but I think it looks kind of cool. I'm gonna go back in and touch up the matte purple on that outer corner just to make sure I haven't lost all sense of definition, and also just re-emphasize that there is purple out here. Re-intensify that purple. I think that also helps with the kind of gradient. And then going back in with the shade Sage on the inner corner to re-intensify the green. And then with the respective green and purple blending brushes, just blending out those edges one more time. Definitely got some fallout going on underneath, same as last time. So I'm just gonna take my concealer off and reapply after I have finished up the lower lash line. That is one takeaway from using these palettes so far, is that you definitely want to do your base after your eye makeup, because the sparkles, because there's just so much sparkle in these shades, and also using my fingers probably didn't help, but I think the fallout is just, it's gonna be an issue. Maybe if you use something like the NYX glitter primer and just were very careful with your placement, but even then, knowing me, I would still have shimmers all down my face. So for myself, at least, I will definitely make sure to apply my base products after my eye makeup when using these palettes in the future. Okay, so for the lower lash line, I'm gonna take that deepest purple shade Orchid at the outer corner and meet that up with the outer corner on my upper lid. And then I'm gonna take Sage on the inner half, which is that deeper green that we used. And then I'm just gonna blend out the purple side with the shade Azalea. And the green side with the shade Clover, which was that lightest green that we used at the very beginning of the look. And then on the inner corner, I'm going to take the shade Best Buds again, which is that brightest, lightest green shimmer. And then the shade Misty next to that. And then the shade Lush. And finally, the shade Magnolia. And then I'm just going to take my wipe and clean that up a little bit because that's just a little bit too low for me. And then as my final touch, my very inner corner shade, I'm going to take the shade Dawn, which is kind of an iridescent yellow-green gold. This is what that shade Dawn looks like. It's like an iridescent white to green to gold with maybe a little bit of orange in it. And just tapping that right in that inner corner. Super pretty. And it actually shines a little bit, yeah, pinky orange. So it's almost picking up on the purpley pink that we have going on the outer corner, which is cool. Okay, so let me go touch up my concealer and do mascara and put on a lip. And then I will be back to show you the final look and also give you my concluding kind of first impressions of both of the ODEN'S Perfect World collab palettes. Okay, I'm back with mascara and lips on. I did decide to take the bow out for the outro because I felt like my hair just was not cooperating. But here is my finished look using the Flora Story palette. Again, I've definitely taken the more colorful route. Both of these palettes have the options for very, very neutral looks, but I really wanted to just try as many of the shades as I could. And actually, as I was doing my mascara, I was thinking, I thought this was going to be like a two-tone green and purple look, but it's almost like a modified grungy rainbow in a way, which is kind of cool. So let's go over the shades that I used in this palette just to give you some of my first impressions, and then I'll talk more generally about both palettes together, whether or not I recommend them, who I recommend them for, any kind of techniques that I would recommend if you've already purchased the palettes, etc. So I actually used every shade in the palette in this look aside from the neutral brown, which is this shade Shroom. And I would say the mattes, so I used 4 mattes, Clover, Azalea, Sage, and Orchid. Each of the mattes went on pretty light, so I was able to build them up, but that's something to be aware of, that to get the kind of depth that you want, you might have to spend some time building. So all of them were like that with the exception of the deepest purple, the shade Orchid. That one went on super pigmented with barely tapping my brush in there. The shimmers were all really easy to work with. I think if you can, using your fingers with ODEN'S eye shimmers is the way to go. And the look that I did using the Sea Talk palette, I was playing around with brushes and trying to spray my brush and all of that. And the shadows just didn't go on as easily. So if at all possible, using your fingers with the ODEN'S eye shimmers is definitely, in my opinion, the way to get the quickest payoff with the least amount of effort, if that makes sense. Just make sure that you don't do your base first because of the fallout situation, or maybe you could use one of those like little eyeshadow shields or whatever you need to do to avoid fallout. Do it, because these definitely do have some glitter fallout in a big way. I'd be curious to know if anyone has tried these with a glitter glue like the NYX glitter primer, and if you've had a significant reduction in fallout that way, because I feel like that would really help with these shades. For some reason, the Sea Talk palette seems to have more variations in formula. There was that really flaky shade Iridescent Shell, that satin shade Electric Kelp, this really kind of sheer shade Sea Spray, and then, you know, a really thick kind of highly concentrated shimmer with Mermaid Scale. So I felt like there was a little bit less predictability when it came to using the shades. I kind of didn't know what kind of finish I was going to get from the shades. Whereas with the Flora Story palette, it seemed like there was a slight variation between a few of the shades. Like Misty, for example, seemed to be a little bit less kind of concentrated than something like Best Buds, which was that lightest green shimmer. But overall, I'm not sure if it was because I was working with my fingers or whatever, but I just felt like I had an easier time with the application from the Flora Story palette. So I'm going to dip back into the Sea Talk palette again now that I've had a chance to use it and see if maybe just applying with my fingers using a NYX glitter primer type product or just some other ways of playing with it might help me get to grips with all the different formulas in here. Not a bad experience whatsoever. I absolutely loved the look that I created from the Sea Talk palette, and I showed the look on my Instagram and you all really seem to like it too. So I think the color story is super fun. The color story of the Flora Story palette is absolutely up my alley. I love a green eye look and I love a purple eye look. I'm not sure I would always mix them together like I have in my look today, but it was fun to play around and experiment, and I think this look came out really interesting and unique. So yeah, I think if you were thinking about these palettes and you haven't purchased them yet, that you might be able to get a sense of whether or not you would jive with them from what I've said already. But I think they're certainly very good quality. I like that they are experimenting with different formulations of eyeshadow and shimmer topper type shades. The color stories, if they are drawing your eye, I don't think you'd be disappointed with these palettes, but definitely just a few things to keep in mind when it comes to your application of them to make your experience a little bit more seamless, if that makes sense. So I'm excited to play around with these palettes more. Let me know if you would like to see a 3 looks 1 palette with either the Sea Talk or the Flora Story palette. I had a lot of fun creating these looks today, and I hope you had fun watching. If you did, just give the video a like if you liked it, and subscribe if you'd like to see some more content from me. I will hope to have my next video up in the next couple of days, so until then, I will see you next time. Bye!